In the previous video, I've discussed about selecting a plane and creating the first sketch. In this video, I'll talk about extruded boss or base. Extruded boss feature is the most commonly used feature in any 3D modeling software, and in SolidWorks you can find in Features tab. Under Features tab, the very first option is extruded boss or base. This is what we are going to use for this sketch. What is an extrusion? In design terminology, extrusion is nothing but adding a third dimension to a two-dimensional object. In this case, we have three different two-dimensional shapes. The first one is rectangle, the second one is hexagon, and the last one we have circle. Now these three shapes are on three different planes. Rectangle is on front plane, hexagon is on top plane, whereas the circle is on right plane. Let's have a look at this rectangle. I'm going to select normal too. So here we have two dimensions. One is length and the other one is breadth or width or length. It doesn't matter. So basically it has two dimensions. When I add a third dimension in this direction or this direction, it becomes a 3D object. To do that, I'm going to select extruded boss or base here. Whenever you select extruded boss or base option, you can see a message. The first one says select a plane on which to sketch the feature cross section. Now you can select a plane and then create a new sketch and then extrude it, or the second one, select an existing sketch to use for the feature. Here we have three different sketches on three different planes. We can select any sketch to use this feature. For now, I'm going to select a sketch, an existing sketch, and later I'll explain how to create a new sketch and use extruded boss or base feature. So I'm going to select this rectangle here. You can select any vertex, any edge. So once I select this, you can see this extrusion here. So this is getting extruded by 60.25 mm in this direction, and you can see some thickness getting added to it, which is basically the third dimension. And we have certain things here. The first one is from, and under from we have sketch plane by default. And whenever you select this, whenever you click on this drop down here, you can see surface, face or plane, vertex and offset. I'm going to explain them in the later section. For now, let's leave it as default. So we have sketch plane. Sketch plane is nothing but the plane on which we have 2D drawing. In this case it is front plane, and under direction 1 it says blind. Now blind is nothing but this 2D object is getting extruded in this direction for about 60.25 mm. So we have cuboid with height of 60.25 mm here. We can change the value by simply editing it. I can make it 100 or I can make it 150. It doesn't matter. You can change the value as per your requirements. For now, I'm going to leave it as 60. Or instead of editing the value here, you can simply drag this arrow mark. When you are dragging this arrow mark, you can see a ruler right next to it, which gives you the value. So this says that the rectangle is getting extruded by 95 mm in this direction, or it is getting extruded by 80 mm in this direction. Also, we have another feature which is draft. So this option is basically disabled by default. You can enable it by simply selecting this button here or selecting this option. So I'm going to enable draft right now. For draft angle, we have a value of 15 degrees, and you can see that there is a change in the angle here. You can see the change in angle on all the sides, on all the side faces. By default, the value will be 1. When the draft angle is 1 degree, you won't be able to observe a great change here unless and until you zoom in. But with greater angle you can observe the difference clearly. So this is drafting inwards, and when I select draft outwards here, when I tick this box, you can see this. So here it is getting extruded or drafted outwards by 10 degrees. You can observe the same thing on this side too. I'm gonna deselect this and I'm gonna disable this feature. Also, we have another option which says direction 2. Here we have only one direction, which is upward direction, and if I want to use only one direction and I want to make it or extrude it downwards, I can use this option which says reverse direction. I can simply select this and it gets extruded in the reverse direction. Or let's have a look at it by entering a negative value. Let's see what happens if I enter a negative value. If I enter -80, will it go downward? No, SolidWorks won't accept a negative value in this case. So I'm going to make it 80 and then select this reverse direction option to extrude it in the reverse direction. For now, I'm just gonna go back to initial position. If I want this rectangle to get extruded in both directions, I can use direction 2. When I use direction 2, it asks for the depth in direction 2, and under end condition we have blind, so I'm gonna make it 40. And here you can clearly see that this rectangle is getting extruded by 80 mm upwards and by 40 mm downwards. So we have two different depths here. Also, if I enable draft angle, you can see a difference in the shape. This way you can create some 3D shapes. I'm going to deselect this. I'm going to deselect this direction 2 too. And then we have the last option which says thin feature. When I select thin feature, you can see it is asking, you can see one direction here. So let's have a look at what happens when I change the thickness. Let's make it 100 mm. So you can see that there is a thickness of 100 mm and we are making it a shell. We are making it hollow and there is a thickness of 100 mm between the inner surface and outer surface. Let's make it 10 mm. So now there is a thickness, or there is a difference, or there is a distance of 10 mm between the inner surface and outer surface. Let's make it mid-plane. So when I select mid-plane, you can see that the rectangle is here, and we have 5 mm on this side and 5 mm on this side, so it gets distributed symmetrically, and you can see it clearly if I increase the value. So here we have 25 mm on this side and 25 mm on this side. Then we have two directions. Now for two directions we can give two different thickness on either sides of rectangle. So we have this rectangle here which is basically 2D object, and then we have 50 mm on this side and 5 mm on this side, which is thickness 2. And if I change this to 20, you can see the difference here. So now we have a difference of 20 mm under direction 2, and we have a difference of, or we have a thickness of 50 mm in first direction. So I'm going to deselect this and I'm going to click OK. So now we have a 3D object which is a solid object, and it is a cuboid, and this is on front plane. And when I select normal to front plane, you can simply see a rectangular cross section. And when we go to a trimetric or any three-dimensional view, you can see a 3D object. So here we have length and breadth, and this one is basically thickness. You can see a thickness of 80 mm or depth of 80 mm. Let's have a look at extrusion of other two 2D objects. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select extrude boss or base, and I'll select this circle. So this circle is getting extruded in this direction, and it says merge result. So whenever you have two different objects intersecting each other, two different 3D objects intersecting each other, you can see this merge result option. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse this direction so that this circle gets extruded in this direction. So I'll select reverse direction. So here we don't need this merge result anymore, or we can use that so that these two surfaces will be coincidental, this surface and this surface. And distance I'm going to leave it as 80 mm. Okay, so we have two different 3D objects on two different planes. I'm going to extrude this hexagon too. For that I'll again go back to extrude boss or base feature, and I'm going to select this sketch. It is getting extruded in upward direction. I just want to extrude this in downward direction. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna reverse this and click OK. So here we have an hexagon on this side, a cylinder on this side, and a cuboid on this face. Let's have a look at other options in extrude boss or base feature. I'm gonna click on edit feature, and instead of sketch plane I'm gonna change this to offset. When I select offset, it asks for offset distance. So offset value I'm gonna enter it as 20 mm. Let's see what happens when I enter offset value. So you can see that there is a difference, or there is a gap of 20 mm between the front plane and the surface. If I make it 50 mm, you can see that there is a difference of 50 mm between the front plane and the surface. We can also reverse the direction, and when we reverse the direction, this is what happens. You can see that there is a gap, or there is a distance of 50 mm from front plane to this surface, and there is a rest, and we have rest 30 mm above the front plane. So this way we can use offset too. Also we have some other options under blind end condition. The first one is blind, which we already used. Next we have up to vertex, and then we have up to surface. This we can use only when we have other 3D objects or other 2D objects on front plane. Right now we don't have any, so we're not gonna use that. Also we have offset from surface. Again we need to have a reference surface to use this, and then we need to have a reference face or body to use this. But for now we will have a look at mid plane. When I select mid plane, and let's make it sketch plane. When I select mid plane, we will have a symmetrical extrusion on both sides. Now we have 80 mm as the depth value, which means we have 40 mm over here and 40 mm on this side. And if I make it 100, we have 50 on this side and 50 on this side. So it always gets extruded symmetrically. That is why we use mid plane. So we'll go back to blind, and also whenever you select mid plane you cannot see direction 2, and if I go back to blind you can see direction 2 as usual. So this is how you can use extruded boss or base on existing sketch. Now I'm gonna hide all these sketches to make it clear. So I'm gonna hide this. So we have nothing on the canvas because all are hidden. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new sketch and then use extruded boss on that sketch. So to do that, I'll select top plane and select sketch, and I'm gonna use normal to here. So we are going to create a new sketch on top plane. I'll simply create a straight slot. Okay, so we have this 2D shape here. I'm gonna exit sketch, and now I'll go to features tab and then select extrude boss or base. Automatically this 2D object is selected because we don't have any other drawings by default. So this shape is getting extruded by 80 mm in this direction, or I can make it 50 mm and select OK. So this way you can start a new sketch and then use extruded boss or base on that sketch, or as we have discussed already, you can use an existing sketch and use extruded boss or base feature on that existing sketch. You can simply hide the components by right clicking on that and selecting this feature or selecting that option. So here we have an extrusion which we have created using a new sketch. See you in the next tutorial. Till then, take care. Bye bye.